The night my mother kicked me out, it was raining. Not the gentle kind that makes you want to curl up with a book, but the harsh, biting kind that feels like tiny needles against your skin. I was 16, standing in our pristine living room, my school backpack clutched to my chest like a shield. "You're impossible!" Mom spat the words at me, her perfectly manicured hand gripping the failed math test I'd tried to hide. "I can't deal with your rebellion anymore. Your brother never gives us this much trouble." Ah, yes, perfect Michael, with his straight A's and quiet obedience. He stood at the top of the stairs, watching with wide eyes, but saying nothing, just like always. I tried explaining about my learning disability, the one my teacher suggested getting tested for. "More excuses," Mom cut me off. "Always excuses with you, Sarah. Do you know what this behavior does to our family's reputation? To my position on the school board?" That's when something in me snapped. Years of being compared to Michael, of trying to meet impossible standards, of walking on eggshells in my own home, it all came pouring out. Maybe if you spent half as much time helping me as you do planning Michael's academic future, I wouldn't be failing. I saw the slap coming before I felt it. Mom had never hit me before, and the shock of it silenced the room. Even Michael gasped. The diamond on her wedding ring had cut my cheek, and I felt a small trickle of blood. "Get out," she whispered, her voice trembling with rage. "If you're so unhappy with how we parent you, then leave. You're old enough to make your own choices? Fine, make them somewhere else." I thought she was bluffing. I really did. Even as I shoved some clothes into my backpack, even as I grabbed my phone charger and the $43 from my piggy bank, I kept waiting for her to stop me, to soften, to be the mother I desperately needed. But she just stood there, arms crossed, watching me pack with those cold eyes. Dad wasn't home. He was never home when it mattered. Working late again, letting Mom rule our lives with her iron fist and impossible expectations. The last thing I saw before the door slammed was Michael's face, tears streaming down his cheeks. He mouthed, "I'm sorry, but didn't move to help. Couldn't move to help. We both knew the cost of defying Mom." I stood on our porch for what felt like hours, the rain soaking through my thin jacket, waiting for the door to open. It didn't. As I walked away from the only home I'd ever known, I swore I'd never beg them for anything again. 5 years later, when my phone lit up with Mom's number for the first time since that night, I almost laughed at the irony, because now she was the one begging. Michael needed a bone marrow transplant, and I was his only match. But what she didn't know was that I'd kept every hospital bill from my time on the streets, every record of what her cruelty had cost me, and I was ready to show her exactly what happens when you throw away your child. Looking back, the signs were always there. Mom didn't snap overnight. She crafted her favoritism like an art form, carefully molding our family dynamics until Michael shone like gold and I was nothing but tarnished brass. It started when Michael skipped third grade. Mom paraded him around like a trophy, hosting dinner parties just to brag about her gifted son. Meanwhile, I sat at the kids' table, struggling with dyslexia no one had diagnosed yet, hearing whispers about how different the siblings were. "Why can't you be more like your brother?" became the soundtrack of my childhood. Michael would win a science fair, and Mom would tape his certificate to the fridge. I'd win first place in the art show, and my painting would end up in the garage because it didn't match the living room decor. Dad noticed, I think. Sometimes I'd catch him looking at me with guilty eyes over his newspaper. Once he even bought me an art set, professional grade pastels that made my heart soar, but Mom accidentally donated them during a spring cleaning. "Sarah needs to focus on her academics," she said. Dad just sighed and retreated to his home office. The real kicker came during my sophomore year. I overheard Mom and Dad arguing about college funds. "We need to be practical," Mom was saying. "Michael's Yale aspirations have to take priority. Sarah, well, community college would suit her better anyway." They had emptied my college fund, every penny I'd received from grandparents, every birthday check, and moved it to Michael's account. Michael wasn't cruel about it. Not really. He was just complicit. When Mom would praise him at my expense, he'd stare at his shoes. When she'd rip up my artwork because I hadn't finished my math homework, he'd quietly retreat to his room. We used to be close back when we were little. He'd help me sound out difficult words, and I'd draw pictures for his stories. But Mom's poison seeped into everything, even our sibling bond. Teachers tried to help. Mrs. Rodriguez, my art teacher, even called a conference to discuss my exceptional talent and the possibility of art school. Mom sat there with her frozen smile, nodding at all the right moments. The next day, I was pulled out of art class and put into additional math tutoring. I started acting out, I'll admit it, snuck out a few times, talked back, let my grades slip. Each small rebellion was a desperate cry for attention, for someone to notice I was drowning. But Mom only saw defiance. She started taking pictures of my messy room, keeping a log of every transgression in her perfect handwriting, building her case against me, though I didn't know it then. The day before everything exploded, I found Michael crying in his room. The pressure of being perfect was crushing him too, but he was too scared to break rank. "Sometimes," he whispered, "I wish I could be invisible like you." I wanted to tell him that being invisible was worse than any pressure, but we both heard Mom's heels clicking down the hallway, and the moment was gone. That failed math test wasn't just about numbers. It was the last thread of a tapestry that had been unraveling for years. Mom didn't kick me out because of one bad grade. She kicked me out because I had finally stopped trying to be someone I could never be, her version of perfect. Looking at those hospital bills now, each one dated and documented from my time on the streets, I wonder if she ever regretted her choice. But as my phone buzzes with another desperate message about Michael, I realize it doesn't matter anymore. Some choices can't be undone with simple regret. That first night was the longest of my life. The rain had soaked through everything, my clothes, my backpack, even the emergency homework papers I'd grabbed out of habit. Funny how your brain works in crisis, still thinking about Monday's history assignment while you're becoming homeless. I walked until my feet ached, ending up at Canyon Park, where Michael and I used to play as kids. The playground equipment cast long shadows under the streetlights, and the old oak tree we'd climbed countless times offered little shelter from the rain. I tried calling my best friend Emma, but her mom answered, one of Mom's closest friends from the school board. "Sarah, oh dear, your mother just called. She said you ran away. You need to go home and apologize." The bench I finally settled on was cold and wet, but it was better than nothing. I kept expecting headlights to sweep across the park, Dad's car pulling up to take me home. He'd be angry but understanding, would stand up to Mom finally. But the only cars that passed were strangers, and none of them slowed down. Around midnight, my phone lit up with a text from Michael. "Mom's called the neighbors, told them you ran away after stealing money, said not to help you." My hands shook as I read it. Of course she'd thought ahead, poisoning every well I might drink from. That was Mom, always controlling the narrative. The temperature dropped as night deepened. I huddled in the play tunnel, wrapping myself in the one sweater I'd grabbed. Each sound made me jump. Rustling leaves became footsteps. Distant car doors were potential threats. A raccoon's sudden appearance nearly gave me a heart attack. Around 3 a.m., a police car cruised by, spotlight sweeping the park. I pressed myself deeper into the shadows, heart pounding. Mom's voice echoed in my head. If you're so unhappy with how we parent you, then leave. What would she have told the police? That I was troubled, dangerous, unstable? Dawn brought with it a harsh reality. I had $43, a dying phone, and nowhere to go. School was out. Mom would have certainly turned the administration against me. My part-time job at the library? She was friends with the head librarian. Every safety net I might have counted on had been carefully cut away long before I fell. The morning joggers started arriving at the park. I caught their suspicious glances, saw how they gripped their phones tighter as they passed. Amazing how quickly you become invisible and threatening at the same time when you're homeless. My phone buzzed one last time before dying. Another text from Michael. Mom's telling everyone you had a mental breakdown. Dad wants to look for you, but she says you need to learn your lesson. I'm sorry, Sarah. I'm so sorry. I deleted the message, then turned off my phone to save what little battery remained. Looking at my reflection in the park bathroom mirror, I hardly recognized myself. The cut on my cheek from Mom's ring had scabbed over, a small crescent moon that would eventually scar, a permanent reminder of the night my mother chose her reputation over her daughter. I splashed water on my face and changed into my spare shirt. First priority, find food. Second, find somewhere safe for the night. I couldn't think beyond that yet. Couldn't process the enormity of what had happened. Survival first, feelings later. As I left the park, I spotted Mrs. Chen opening her convenience store across the street. She'd always snuck extra candy into my purchases when I was little. But as I approached, I saw her face change, that look of recognition followed by deliberate avoidance. Mom's influence had reached even here. I walked past the store, head high, tears hidden behind my tangled hair. I was 16, alone, and officially homeless. But I refused to break. Mom had taken everything else from me. She wouldn't take my dignity, too. The first 3 weeks were an education in invisibility. I learned that public libraries were safe havens during the day. Warm, quiet, with free bathrooms and water fountains. I discovered which coffee shops would let you sit for hours with one small coffee, and which fast food places would kick you out after 30 minutes. My $43 lasted exactly 4 days. After that, I learned to dumpster dive behind restaurants, timing it perfectly to catch the day-old bread and barely expired produce they threw out. My stomach churned with shame the first time, but hunger is a harsh teacher. Pride doesn't fill an empty stomach. The worst part wasn't the hunger, though. It was the constant vigilance. Every shadow meant danger, every stranger a potential threat. I slept in 2-hour increments, always half awake, always ready to run. The park bathroom became my morning routine, washing my face, brushing my teeth with a finger, trying to look presentable enough that people wouldn't stare. Then came the fever. Started as a cold from sleeping in the rain, developed into something worse. I tried ignoring it, but after collapsing behind the library, a security guard called an ambulance. That's when I got my first hospital bill, $2,847 for emergency room care. I kept it, carefully folded, a record of my mother's lesson. But that hospital visit changed everything. A nurse named Maria saw past my lies about falling at a friend's house. She slipped me her card along with information about a youth shelter. No questions asked, she whispered. Just get somewhere safe. The shelter was full, but the woman at the desk, Gloria, made some calls. She found me a spot at a women's center across town. 3 nights, she said. Make them count. Those 3 nights were the first real sleep I'd had since leaving home. During the day, I haunted job boards at the community center. My age was a problem. Not many places want to hire a homeless teenager. But desperation makes you creative. I lied about my age, used the Women's Center address, and finally landed 2 jobs: morning shifts at a bakery and evening work cleaning offices. The bakery job saved me in more ways than one. Jenny, the owner, caught me pocketing leftover bread one morning. Instead of firing me, she started scheduling me for extra shifts. "Can't have my employees going hungry," she said gruffly, sliding me a proper breakfast. She never asked about my story, but she made sure I always had food and a safe place to rest between shifts. My phone stayed off most of the time, preserved for emergencies, but every few days I'd turn it on at the library while charging it. Michael's messages became less frequent. "Dad's drinking more. Mom's redecorated your room. Everyone at school thinks you're in a special program out of state." Each message was a glimpse into how easily I'd been erased. The first month's pay from both jobs went entirely to survival: a gym membership for showers, a secondhand sleeping bag, basic necessities. But by the second month, I had enough to rent a spot in a shared room above the Chinese restaurant where my new friend May worked. It wasn't much, just a mattress and shared bathroom with 3 other girls. But it was safer than the streets. One night, about 2 months in, I saw Dad's car cruising slowly past the bakery. He looked older, tired. For a moment, our eyes met through the window. I saw his hand move toward the door handle, hesitate, then fall away. The car pulled back into traffic and he was gone. That night, I cried for the first time since leaving home, not for what I'd lost, but for what had never really existed. The hospital bills kept coming: routine vaccinations, a twisted ankle from running away from some drunk guys, strep throat that wouldn't go away. I filed each one carefully away. Not for revenge, not then, but as evidence that I had survived, that every day I was choosing to live despite them. Life changed the day I met Dr. Rivera at the free clinic. I was there for another strep test, trying to explain my symptoms without mentioning I'd been sleeping in a damp room. She noticed the textbook peeking out of my bag. I'd been studying whenever I could, determined not to fall behind despite everything. "You're studying calculus?" she asked, looking at my worn textbook. When I explained about wanting to graduate on time, her face softened. "My office needs help filing medical records in the evenings. Interested?" The job paid better than both my other positions combined, and more importantly, it came with something priceless: stability. Dr. Rivera became more than just an employer. She helped me get my GED, working around my schedule and tutoring me during lunch breaks. "You have a brilliant mind," she'd say, especially when math problems frustrated me. "You just need someone to help you find the right way to learn." The diagnosis of dyscalculia came 3 months later. All those years of struggling with math, of Mom's disappointment and accusations of laziness. There had been a reason. Dr. Rivera helped me develop strategies to work around it, showing me different ways to approach problems. For the first time in my life, numbers started making sense. My small room above the restaurant became home. I pinned up schedules, study guides, and one small drawing, the first art I'd allowed myself to create since leaving. May taught me to cook using the restaurant's leftovers, and slowly my ribs stopped showing through my skin. I started an online high school program, working through courses at night after my shifts. My grades improved without the constant pressure of comparison. Even math became manageable with the right accommodations. Every completed assignment felt like a personal victory, proof that Mom had been wrong about me. The hospital bills continued to arrive, regular checkups now mostly. Dr. Rivera helped me understand them, teaching me about insurance and payment plans. "Knowledge is power," she'd say, showing me how to document everything properly. I hadn't told her about my family, but somehow she seemed to understand. 1 year turned into 2. I moved to a better apartment, started community college classes, and even began building savings. The girl who'd huddled in a park tunnel felt like a different person, someone from a story I'd read rather than lived. Then came the day I saw my artwork displayed in the community college gallery. My professor had entered it without telling me. Standing there, looking at my painting under proper lighting, I felt tears running down my cheeks. Mom's voice in my head, "Art won't pay the bills," was finally growing quieter. That's when I got the first message from Michael in over a year. "I miss you, and I need to tell you something important." Attached was a photo of him in a hospital bed, looking pale and thin. The sight of him hit me like a physical blow. My little brother, the golden child, now connected to machines and IV lines. My phone lit up again. "They found cancer. It's bad, Sarah. Mom's going to contact you. Please, just listen when she does." I sat in the gallery for hours, staring at my artwork. A painting of 2 children climbing an oak tree, their faces turned away, forever caught in a moment before everything changed. Dr. Rivera found me there, took one look at my face and said, "Let's get coffee. Seems like you have a story to tell." 4 years after being kicked out, my life had become unrecognizable. Dr. Rivera hadn't just given me a job, she'd given me a future. After finishing my medical billing certification, I moved up to handling insurance claims for the entire clinic. My tiny desk became an office, and my paycheck finally had commas in it. The new apartment I rented was small but mine alone. No roommates, no shared bathrooms, just clean space with walls I could paint any color I wanted. I chose yellow, bright and warm, everything my mother's pristine beige house hadn't been. My art hung on every wall, each piece a testament to survival. I'd built a different kind of family, too. Jenny from the bakery still saved me fresh croissants every Sunday. May and I had weekly dinner dates where she critiqued my attempts at cooking. Dr. Rivera had become the mother figure I'd always needed, celebrating my victories and helping me navigate setbacks with gentle wisdom. My savings account grew steadily. Each deposit was a brick in the wall between my past and present. I even started a small side business doing medical billing consulting for other clinics. The girl who'd once been called hopeless with numbers was now explaining insurance codes to doctors. Then came the recognition. A healthcare journal published my article about improving billing systems for low-income patients. Dr. Rivera framed it and hung it in the clinic's waiting room. "See," she said, "sometimes the best expertise comes from living through something." I kept tabs on my old life through social media glimpses. Mom had become president of the school board. Dad's drinking showed in his reddened face in Christmas photos. Michael graduated valedictorian and got into Yale. Mom's dream fulfilled. Their lives seemed to move forward as if I'd never existed. The hospital bills stayed organized in a fireproof box under my bed. 37 separate invoices, each one a chapter in my survival story. Total cost, $23,847.92. The price of being thrown away at 16. I was reviewing insurance claims at my desk when the first call came. Unknown number, but I answered. Part of my job. The voice on the other end made my blood freeze. "Sarah, baby, please don't hang up." Mom's voice cracking with what sounded like tears. Gone was the cold authority, replaced by desperation. "It's about Michael. He's sick. Really sick." My hand didn't shake as I reached for my fireproof box. What kind of sick, Mother? My voice surprised me. Calm, professional, the voice I used with difficult insurance companies. Leukemia, she whispered. We need. She took a shuddering breath. The doctors say you might be a match for bone marrow donation. Please, Sarah. He's your brother. I looked at my office wall, at the degrees and certifications that proved Mom wrong, at the artwork that she'd tried to suppress, at the life I'd built from the ashes of her rejection. Text me the hospital information, I said finally. I'll think about it. After she hung up, I pulled out the stack of hospital bills and started scanning them. 4 years of medical history, carefully documented. Every fever, every injury, every illness that could have killed me on the streets she'd put me on. My phone buzzed with the hospital details. Below it, a message from Michael. I'm sorry to drag you back into this, but I'm scared, Sarah. Really scared. I closed my eyes, remembering the brother who'd watched me walk into the rain. Then I opened my email and began composing a message to the hospital's billing department, attaching my scanned documents one by one. Let them see exactly what their perfect family had cost me. The hospital's fluorescent lights made everyone look sickly, but Michael truly looked awful. 4 years had aged him more than they should have. His face gaunt, dark circles under his eyes, hair thin from treatments. When he saw me, he tried to sit up, but the movement clearly exhausted him. Mom hovered by his bed like a nervous butterfly, her designer outfit out of place against the sterile hospital walls. Dad stood by the window, looking older and grayer than I remembered. The family portrait was complete, except now I was the outsider looking in. Sarah, Michael's voice was barely a whisper. You came. Before I could respond, Mom rushed forward, arms outstretched. I stepped back, keeping the hospital bed between us. Her arms dropped, but her practiced smile stayed in place. We've missed you so much, sweetheart. If you'd just let us explain. I'm here for Michael, I cut her off. Not for a family reunion. The doctor explained the situation clinically. Michael needed a bone marrow transplant. I was his only viable match. A cruel, cosmic joke considering how different we'd always been told we were. The procedure would require multiple hospital visits, recovery time, possible complications. Insurance will cover everything, Mom rushed to add. We just need you to sign, like you covered my medical expenses? I pulled out the first hospital bill from my folder. Emergency room visit, November 15th, 4 years ago. Severe fever and dehydration from sleeping in the rain, $2,847. Mom's face paled. Michael's monitors beeped steadily in the silence. Or how about this one? I continued, pulling out another bill. Urgent care, December 3rd. Frostbite concerns, $612. Oh, and my personal favorite emergency dental work after being assaulted while sleeping in a shelter, $4,000. Sarah, please, Dad finally spoke, his voice rough. We know we made mistakes. Mistakes? I laughed, the sound harsh against the hospital walls. You didn't forget to pick me up from school, Dad. You threw away your 16-year-old daughter. You let her become homeless because she didn't fit Mom's perfect family image. Michael started coughing, harsh, racking sounds that made everyone flinch. Mom rushed to adjust his oxygen, shooting me accusing looks as if his distress was my fault. Do you know what the total is? I spread the bills across Michael's bed. $23,847.92. That's what it cost me to survive after you kicked me out. That's not counting the psychological trauma, the missed education, the years of struggling alone. We'll pay it, Mom said quickly. All of it. Whatever you want, just please help your brother. I looked at Michael, saw the fear in his eyes, the silent plea, the golden child now tarnished by illness. Part of me wanted to walk away, to let them feel a fraction of the helplessness I'd felt. But another part remembered the little boy who'd shared his cookies when Mom punished me without dinner. "I'll do the testing," I said finally. "But not for you." I looked directly at Mom. "And before I sign anything, we're going to talk about exactly what happened 4 years ago. No more perfect family fairy tales. It's time for the truth." The monitors kept beeping steadily as I pulled up a chair, my folder of bills still spread across the hospital bed like a paper trail of sins. "Let's start with the night you decided your reputation was worth more than your daughter's life." The hospital conference room felt too small for the weight of our conversation. I'd insisted we move away from Michael's room. He didn't need to witness this. The bills lay spread across the table between us, a paper timeline of my survival. "Start with the first night," I said, pushing forward the earliest bill. "Tell Michael what really happened after I left." Mom's perfectly manicured nails trembled as she picked up the emergency room bill. Her voice was barely a whisper. "I called the neighbors, told them you'd stolen money and run away. I was so angry, so worried about what people would think, not about what would happen to your 16-year-old daughter alone on the streets." I kept my voice steady. "Tell him about the school board meeting the next day." Dad's head snapped up. "What school board meeting?" "The one where Mom told everyone I'd been sent to a special program for troubled teens." The words tasted bitter. How she used my breakdown to push for stricter disciplinary policies. Got herself promoted to committee chair. Mom's face crumpled. "I was protecting our family's reputation." "By destroying mine?" I pulled out more bills. "While you were protecting your reputation, I was sleeping in park tunnels. While you were redecorating my room, I was fighting off pneumonia. Every time you told people I was getting help, I was actually fighting to survive." Dad started reading through the bills, his hands shaking. "The dental work. What happened?" "Two men found me sleeping in a shelter doorway. Decided a homeless teenager was an easy target." I watched Mom flinch. "Dr. Rivera helped me file a police report, but they never found them." "Dr. Rivera?" Michael's voice came from the doorway. He stood there in his hospital gown, gripping his IV pole for support. No one had noticed him enter. "The doctor who saved my life, who gave me a job, helped me get my GED, diagnosed my dyscalculia." I met Mom's eyes. "Remember that learning disability you refused to have tested? Turns out I'm not stupid or lazy. I just needed help." Michael shuffled to the table, picking up bills with trembling hands. "All this time, when they said you were away getting help?" "I was sleeping in shelters, working 3 jobs, learning how to survive." I softened my voice. "While you were winning academic awards, I was learning which dumpsters had edible food. While Mom was bragging about your Yale acceptance, I was finally getting my own apartment." The silence was deafening. Mom had stopped trying to hide her tears. Dad looked like he'd aged 10 years in 10 minutes. "Show them the last one," Michael said quietly. I pulled out the final bill dated just 6 months ago. My first preventive care checkup in 4 years, the first time I could afford to see a doctor when I wasn't dying. I laid it gently on top of the others. "The day I finally felt like I might survive what you did to me." Mom reached for my hand. I pulled back. "Don't. You don't get to play mother now. I'll help Michael because he was as much a victim of your perfectionism as I was. But you don't get absolution. These bills, they're your legacy. Every dollar spent keeping me alive after you threw me away." "What do you want us to do?" Dad's voice cracked. "I want you to look at each bill, read every diagnosis, every treatment, understand exactly what your choices cost." I stood up, gathering the bills carefully. And then I want you to live with that knowledge like I've had to live with the scars. As I walked out, Michael called after me. Sarah, thank you. I turned back, seeing not the golden child, but my little brother, scared, sick, and finally seeing our family for what it really was. Get some rest, I said softly. We start testing tomorrow. The bone marrow testing process took weeks. I'd show up for appointments, endure the procedures, and leave immediately after. Dr. Rivera came with me each time, sitting in the waiting room, a silent guardian against my past. You don't have to be here, I told her one day. She looked up from her medical journal. Family shows up, she said simply. Real family. That hit home harder than I expected, because while my biological family sat in Michael's hospital room, my real family was spread across the city. Jenny from the bakery packed special lunches for my appointment days. May organized a schedule so someone was always available to drive me. Even Gloria from the shelter sent care packages. During one of the waiting periods, Michael asked to talk privately. He looked smaller in his hospital bed, more like the little brother I remembered. I need to tell you something, he said, fiddling with his blanket. The night you left, I called Dad's cell, told him what happened, but Mom had already reached him. His voice cracked. She said if he came home early, if he tried to bring you back, she'd tell the school board about his drinking. The revelation shouldn't have hurt after all these years, but it did. She really thought of everything. I've been keeping a record too, he continued, reaching for a notebook. Every time she used me against you, every lie she told, every time she made me feel guilty for missing you. He pushed it toward me. I thought, maybe it could go with your hospital bills. I opened the notebook. Pages of detailed entries, dates, conversations. The flip side of my story, the golden child's prison of perfection. That night, I invited my real family to dinner. Dr. Rivera, Jenny, May, Gloria. They crowded around my small apartment table, sharing stories and passing dishes. Looking around at these people who had chosen to love me, who had helped me survive and thrive, I finally understood what family should be. Mom tried to approach me after one of the procedures. We've set up a fund, she said, to repay all your medical bills with interest. Keep it, I replied. Donate it to the youth shelter. Help other teenagers whose parents throw them away. Dad started attending AA meetings. He'd leave voicemails I wasn't ready to answer, each one an apology 4 years too late. Michael's notebook revealed how Mom's perfectionism had crushed him too, turning him into a prop for her ambitions rather than a person. The final compatibility results came back positive. I was a perfect match for Michael, another irony in a life full of them. As I signed the consent forms, Dr. Rivera standing beside me, I realized something important. Sometimes the family you choose is more real than the family you're born into. Sometimes healing doesn't mean forgiveness, but understanding. And sometimes the best revenge is living well, surrounded by people who love you for exactly who you are. Ready? Dr. Rivera asked as we headed to pre-op. I looked back at my biological family in the waiting room, then at the woman who had helped me rebuild my life from nothing. Yeah, I said, my real family's right here.